17 hammers. This sounds like the back of your pickup, Dad. 17 hammers, 25 spades, 8 pitchforks, 10 pickaxes, 1 sword, 1 lance, 1 bayonet, and 1 U.S. mail bag. The contents of this fascinating list ought to be required reading for anyone who imagines that life in a Cheyenne village was some kind of idyll, or that the Plains Indians in those years had few, if any, dealings with white traders. Clearly, a lot of work was going on, much of it of a filthy and backbreaking kind, and all in the name of keeping 1,500 people from freezing or starving to death on the open plains. But from afar, if not up close, the village on Pawnee Fork struck both Stanley and Custer as a place of surpassing beauty. The savages, Stanley wrote, roaming at large over the entire country, can select of 1,001 lovely spots which nature has so bountifully provided, the loveliest of all. Writing a few years later, Custer echoed the sentiment, like all Indian encampments, the ground chosen was a most romantic spot. Romantic or not, it all went up in flames. The dry poles of the wigwams caught fire like tinder, Stanley wrote. Flakes of fire were borne on the breeze to different parts of the prairie, setting the prairie grass on fire. With lightning speed, the fire rolled on, commencing an immense area of grass. Every green thing and every dead thing that reared its head above the earth was consumed. On the day I set out to find the village, I headed north from Sawlog Creek on Highway 283. Halfway to Ness City, I ran into the dry Pawnee and began following its south bank eastward toward the town of Burdett, figuring that when I saw the place, I would be sure to know it. 2.5 hours later, having zigzagged without success upon mile after mile of narrow sand roads, I finally admitted my mistake and drove 30 miles out of my way to ask directions at Fort Larned National Historical Site. Pawnee Fork, the ranger manning the front desk asked suspiciously, "Why do you want to go to Pawnee Fork?" "I just want to see it," I said. "You're not an artifact hunter, are you?" "No," I said, "I'm a writer." "A writer. And you want to just look at the place, maybe take a few pictures." As if to prove this last point, I held up my $5 disposable camera with its yellow cardboard cover. At this, the ranger sighed, took a pen from his breast pocket of his uniform, and drew a crude map on the back of a postcard. Half an hour later, I pulled up alongside a spot indistinguishable from any other in the area, were it not for a small limestone marker nearly hidden in the roadside weeds. Indian Village on Pawnee Fork, Earl Gadberry Preserve, the marker read. The place looked dry and unpromising. Earlier in the day, I had driven by it at least twice without so much as slowing down. On one side of the marker was a plot of dusty wheat stubble. On the other was a nearly bald pasture. A half mile in the distance, however, a series of two-legged telephone poles rose from the tree-lined creek, poles I recognized from the ranger's crude map. My pulse beginning to quicken, I backtracked a quarter of a mile to a field road and drove in a little deeper. From here, I could see the first in a series of islands within the stream I had read about and seen represented in 19th century maps of the village. Crawling over a 4-wire fence, I descended into the dry creek bed, emerging moments later in a broad meadow, surrounded on all sides by cottonwoods. "I'm here," I thought, the words of Custer and Stanley echoing in my brain, a most romantic spot, the loveliest of all. It was indeed beautiful. More than that, it reminded me powerfully of both Sand Creek and Washita. There was that same tucked away horseshoe feel of the place, that same mix of scenic beauty, protection from the wind, and easy access to water, wood, and grass. Seeing this third example of what the Cheyennes prized in a winter camping ground, I began to understand that these were not the only such sites that I knew about or had visited in my life. Indeed, they were everywhere. As a child, I camped or picnicked in a dozen meadows more or less identical to this one. The chosen spot always looked like this, always felt special and safe, a world away from the unprotected monotony of the plains. My family's ranch on Sawlog Creek, which I count among my favorite places in the world, contained a half-dozen such spots. Each of them, I realized with sudden force, inhabited by ghosts. Postscript. In June 2007, after the site was officially opened by the National Park Service, I was finally able to keep a 2-year-old promise to myself and gaze down from the bluffs overlooking Sand Creek. As I stood looking down at the sandy bed of the creek, other visitors made their way up from the newly built gravel parking lot, the wind whipping at their thin clothes. "Where were the Indians camped?" one of them asked the ranger on duty that day. "We can't say for sure," the ranger said, shrugging. "Somewhere down there. Reports say north side of the creek." It's true what the ranger said. The precise location of Black Kettle's village has never been determined with any accuracy. However, standing on those bluffs, looking down at where the creek makes a dramatic turn to the east, creating a familiar crescent-shaped meadow in the trees below, I felt, for a moment at least, like I knew. Thank you so much.
Very good, Bob. We always, our best and finest seem to get away from us here in Dodge City. But we are glad to have you back, and what wonderful stories.